Next on Garden Line, controlling mosquitoes.
Mosquito wrigglers take about 2 weeks for them to turn into mosquitoes.
McCrory Gardens and Brookings. And trimming the hedge.
This program is funded in part by Swiftel Communications.
Hello and welcome to Garden Line. I'm Stephen Monk. Tonight Garden Line will go to the backyard to learn a little bit more about the proper tools and pruning techniques of the hedge at this midsummer season. We'll also learn about mosquitoes, their larvae, and how to control them. And we will go to a featured McCrory Gardens in Brookings. Joining me in the studio to answer your questions are John Keycafer, Brookings County Extension Educator, Jerry Mills, Brown County Extension Horticulture Educator, and Connie Tandy with the SDSU Plant Diagnostic Lab, and Jim Wilson, Extension Pesticide Educational Coordinator. The phone number for you to call in is 1-866-595-SDSU. Again, that is 1-866-595-7378. Helping answer the phones tonight are the Brookings Area Master Gardeners. Now, when asking your questions and giving that information to the Master Gardeners, provide them with as much information as possible about the problem that you're calling in for. When it first appeared, if it's affecting other plants around there, as well as describing some of the symptoms that that plant may have. But before we get to your questions, Garden Line went into the field with Mike Katangi, Extension Entomologist, in search of mosquitoes. Mike tells us where and how mosquitoes grow, as well as how to control them.
Mosquito wrigglers breed in water, and they don't need a lot of water to multiply. And we're here to look at this small puddle of water and see if it's got wrigglers in them. So I'll use a mosquito dipper and then just dip it here and see if there are mosquito wrigglers. And as you can see, there are hundreds of mosquito wrigglers breeding in just a small puddle of water. Mosquito wrigglers take about 2 weeks for them to turn into mosquitoes, and they will keep on multiplying as long as there's water in this area. I'll go ahead and put this in this dish. That way you can see the wrigglers in this area. Again, there are hundreds of this thing in this just a very small amount of water. And there are many different sizes here. The small ones just hatch. The big ones are ready to transform into mosquitoes. So we need to be looking for these areas on the farm, on the country, because it is a very common sight. A small puddle of water can breed a lot of mosquitoes. Of course, the next question is, what do we do about these wrigglers? We need to control it. And a very common larvicide or an insecticide that control the wrigglers is a BT mosquito dunk. You can find it anywhere in the hardware store, very safe. It contains BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, and what it is an organic larvicide. So we'll just put this on the water, and one dunk will control 100 square foot of area, and the wrigglers will feed on this dunk. They will get the spores or the protein, the Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis protein, and they're going to die from ingesting the insecticidal protein.
Well, we want to thank Mike for that information. With all the rains we've been having, that's really some timely information, because the mosquitoes certainly are, if they aren't already, will be out in the very near future. So, and our panelists, this is the time of the show where you share with us as far as some of the major topics that you're seeing currently. So, John, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, I don't know how major a topic it is. Kind of an interesting one that's been coming in. Found some of these already a couple weeks ago around Brookings. Seem to be larger numbers than normal, and getting calls about them now. This is an example here of the problem, and some people actually are calling in and asking about disease issues on their plants because they're finding these little balls of foam or froth on their plants. And this is actually caused by a spittle bug. Now you don't see it in there because it's inside of there, but if you stick your finger in there and kind of force them out of there, if we go to the next picture here, we'll see that next one. There we go. This is actually the immature insect. It's a true bug. It's got sucking mouth parts, and they feed on those plant tissues and can cause a little bit of harm in the garden. Numbers have to get pretty high before it's worth doing anything about them, but we do see enough of them in some crops anyway, especially vegetable crops like strawberries have been hit pretty hard this spring in some places. If you're finding large numbers of those, it's worth going in with an insecticide and maybe trying to do something about it. For ornamentals or for smaller areas, probably best off just going in and trying to hand pick them even, or even just washing them off with higher pressure hose and get them off those plants if you can.
Okay, thank you, John. Jerry, what do you have for us?
Well, it's not something they're seeing right now, but something they may see in the very near future, and that's tomato-like fruit on their potato plants. Several potato species have already bloomed or will be blooming very soon, and if we could have that first picture, occasionally following the bloom, gardeners are surprised to find these small, round, green, tomato-like fruit on their potatoes. These fruit are not the result of cross-pollination with tomatoes, as many people do think. They are the true fruit of the potato plant. The edible tubers, though, is the enlarged underground stems, and that's what we normally eat off the potatoes. Normally, most potato flowers dry up and they fall off without setting any of this fruit, but a few flowers do occasionally produce fruit. The variety Yukon Gold produces more fruit more heavily than most other varieties. If we could go to that second picture, there you go. The potato fruit are of no value to the gardener. In fact, it contains relatively large amounts of solanine. Solanine is a poisonous alkaloid. The small fruit should not be eaten. And since potatoes don't come true from seed, gardeners should take no effort to try to save this seed.
Okay.
All righty?
So about the only real value there is to try to convince your neighbor that you've come up with a brand new plant.
Yeah, that produces on both ends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Connie, you brought a little sample along with you tonight.
Yeah, I did. This is aster yellows. It's commonly caused by a phytoplasma, which is like a bacteria. I don't know if we can get a picture of that. I don't see where it is, but it produces symptoms that are real leafy-like on the flower petals, really abundant leafy growth on the tops of plants, often with tiny leaves and short internodes, as you can see on my plant. It's really striking on asters, of course, but it can go to a number of common plants, including lettuce and carrots, coneflowers, marigolds, zinnias. Tomatoes and other vegetables are also hosts for it. The produce that they would have, those would be edible. It's going to be deformed and woody and might be not quite as palatable, but it could be palatable. It could be, you can eat it though. It's a tiny little insect that causes that. It's an aster leafhopper, so if you see them, you want to be kind of spraying for them. If you find a plant like this with an aster yellow, you want to get it out of your garden.
Okay. So remove that plant.
Remove the plant.
From that site.
Yeah.
And maybe control-wise, insect control would be kind of a common practice then. Okay. Thank you, Connie. Jim, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, Mike Mechnick asked me to fill in for him. He's out across the state tonight and talk a little bit about weeds. And as I think about weeds this time of year, you know, it seems like those weeds in the garden are just calling to everybody. They're coming along with the crops. Really, as we look at options for weed control in the garden, I think there's one good option. And as one friend of mine told me, that his garden suffers from a lack of iron in the form of a hoe, and that probably is our best option right now is mechanical, where the iron is in the form of a hoe or in a small mechanical tiller. But pulling those weeds is probably our best bet. If we have an opportunity to do some mulching between some of the rows, we were lucky enough to get some of our carrots and onions mulched before this last rain, and boy, they just look like they've been tucked into bed. So I think that's the option I would look at.
All right. Elbow grease.
Elbow grease.
to work on them for right now. Okay, good. Well, thank you, panelists, for some of the current topics that you shared with us tonight. So, Gardenline visited McCrory Gardens this morning to take in its beauty. And here's a glimpse at one of the garden areas within McCrory Gardens, the Lucille Callahan Memorial California Garden. All right, well, we certainly appreciate those beautiful scenes from McCrory Gardens that we're taking today. And feel free to come to Brookings to visit McCrory Gardens whenever it's convenient for you to do that. So now let's get to the part of the program that we're here for, along with what we've already seen and will be seeing in the future as well as part of the program, and that is answering the questions. Jerry, I'm going to give you the first one here. It's about a product called Plant Skid. It's an organic repellent for deer, rabbits, that's supposed to last around 3 months, according to the label. Does it work, or do you know anything about it, is the question.
Well, there's a lot of deer and rabbit repellents out there. The majority of them include the products putrescent eggs, which essentially is a nice name for rotten eggs. And another one contains like a cayenne pepper and kind of heats up their mouth, gives them the spice of life. One of them, the putrescent eggs, kind of keeps them away because of the smell. The other one, they get a hot mouth and decide that it's not as good as what they thought. Some of these contain both of those products, in fact, both a smell repellent as well as a taste repellent. I'm not familiar with the active ingredients in this particular brand name Plant Skid, but the claim that it lasts for 3 months, with the kind of weather that we've been having, I wouldn't rely on it to last 3 months. That rain will wash it off quite quickly. Even some of these products that have a good sticker in them will wash off in the kind of weather that we've been having. You need to keep a close eye on that. There's all sorts of products out there. I even tried one time called Not Tonight Deer. And you know, they still came in and ate the garden overnight. So take it with a grain of salt, try it. If it works for you, great.
All right, thank you. Connie, we have one for you, and I've heard this as far as probably more prevalent in the southern states, but they saw an article about eating corn smut and was wondering if you could talk about it a little bit as far as can you do that? And if there are certain things they should keep in mind if they plan to do that.
If you plan to do it, eat it while it's young. The younger it is, the tastier it is, I'm told. I've never tried it. You can actually buy it down south. It comes canned, ready to be eaten. But yes, you can eat it, but you really want to do it while it's young, very small.
Okay. So as it gets older and more mature,
less tasty, I'm told.
Okay.
Less palatable as those spores get bigger and the taste isn't as good.
All right. Jim, here's one for you. Her neighbor graciously shared his Canadian thistle seed, and now it's in her garden. Flowers, trees, and some of the grass even. What to do? She's been trying to dig it, but it just keeps coming back and hasn't been very successful doing the elbow grease or adding the iron to the garden per se, as you stated a little bit earlier.
Well, when we talk about something like Canada thistle, you know, it's a perennial. It's a very aggressive perennial. In a garden, it's really a difficult weed to control. Honestly, this time of year, when the garden and the crops are planted, really we have very little option for getting chemical control. So elbow grease is probably still our best method during the growing season. Keep the tops off. That prevents the roots from regenerating, so keep the tops cut off as best we can. But as we start to get towards fall, perhaps let those plants grow, and after we've harvested the tomatoes and all our other vegetables, frequently we can, Canada thistle takes from quite cold temperatures. Wait till we get things harvested and then come in probably with a good dose of Roundup, glyphosate product, and control it in the fall. If you spray it, wait 2 weeks. If we see additional growth, hit it again.
Okay. So you mentioned, as far as Roundup in the garden, she also mentioned some trees and grass. Would that be more of a separate product?
In the grass, I would strongly consider, again, waiting till fall, but considering a 2,4-D product probably. We start looking in the trees, that's another little issue. Again, in fall, after leaves have fallen, we still should be able to get by with the 2,4-D product there. We don't want to use any of the dicamba products in trees because we'll have a residual. So 2,4-D and Roundup are probably our options for those two areas.
Okay, thank you. Asparagus, Jerry, we're going to give this one to you. Fertilizing established asparagus plants, 5 to 6 years old. When would be the proper time, and how much, and what to use?
Proper time would be when those ferns, that lacy, ferny growth is starting to produce. Probably now. We've come to the end of the cutting season, you might say, for the tender young spears that we eat on the table. And it's starting to produce those ferny, lacy leaves now that will feed that crown throughout the summer months and store the food in the crown for next spring's growth. And so now is the time to put the fertilizer on. Actual rates, I guess I'm hesitant to say them right here. I'd be kind of guessing. We do have an excellent fact sheet available for most any of our extension offices that is specifically on growing asparagus, and it has some excellent recommendations there on types of fertilizer and the amount per, say, 100 feet of row.
Okay.
Yep.
Would that be an option as well, as if they wanted to contact their extension office to take a soil test to see where they're at? Absolutely.
That would be excellent to assess whether it is deficient in any one of the nutrients, especially nitrogen. The extension office in your local county can provide you with the soil sample forms, the soil sample bag. You send it off to the SDSU soil testing laboratory, and they will analyze it and send you back a recommendation on how much nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium needs to be added to that particular area for that crop, in fact. It's very specific.
Good, thank you. Strawberries, and so we can, well, this might be a combination question here when we read through it here. So she has a strawberry patch. The strawberries get a hard spot on them and don't really continue to grow where that spot is at. How can we prevent that? She also has wild violets. The strawberries is there a spray she can use to control the wild violets? So that's why I think this may be a multi-panel question here. So you want to start, John?
Well, I guess the hard spots, is she talking on the fruit, or is she?
I am assuming the fruit here, the way it's written. So.
Oh boy, that's a good one. I'm not sure what that might be right off the top of my head on the fruit in there. Usually what we've been seeing more of is more concern about soft spots on the fruit rather than hard spots on the fruit. If she could get a sample into us, I think that would really help us out, maybe see what we're looking at there.
Okay. Anything else on the hard spots?
The hard spots, the hard berries that develop are due to a plant bug that shortly after flowering, just as that little berry is starting to form, they come and feed on that. It's a piercing, sucking mouthpart on this plant bug. And that's what causes those little hard button berries in many cases, or hard spots on the berries. And so to prevent that would be the control of this plant bug early in the season. I believe the product of choice there would be malathion. Have to be careful about the flowering and the effect on bees as well, but concentrate on learning more about that plant bug.
Okay, good. Violets, Jim?
Yeah, violets. Let me step back to that one just a second. The other thing, if they do use any of those products, they do need to make sure they go through and make sure there's not a pre-harvest interval on those, because some products will say, you know, wait 7 days after application or some of those things. So they may need to pick all the fruit that's ripe first and before they make the application. Violets. I'm trying to duck this because there's really not an easy answer for this one. It's really a tough one. I have seen some people selectively take a paintbrush and paint the violets with glyphosate, with a Roundup product. That I don't have that much time. It's going to be extremely difficult, and I don't know that I have a very, very good option other than, again, continually trying to pull that out. If they get heavily infested, you may have to move that shrubbery bed.
Start all over somewhere.
May need to do that. That's not an option people like, but sometimes it's best.
Okay. Here we have a two-part question, and we'll start here in the first part, where they planted 2 apple trees a year ago from dormant rootstock. One is a Sweet 16, and the other is a Honeycrisp. They came to life and seemed to do very well, although they did have a little deer grazing on them, they said. But they did put repellent on it. Now it comes spring, and the top trees seem to have died back, as you can see from the photograph here. And this would be, I think, our graphic number 1. The part that also is alive seems to be contained within the tile, where it was protected from rabbits and so on, below the wire tie. 2 questions we have here. What happened to them, and can we salvage those? Can we cut the tops off? But don't know how the tree would grow after we do that, or scrap and start all over. So, any thoughts there, Jerry?
All right, this has a lot of nuances to it that have to be kind of considered and discussed as we go along. It looks like as if this tree has died back down to near the base of the tree. And when we have dieback that far, the first concern we have is it coming back from the root that it was grafted to, or is it coming back from the desirable tree that they planted in the first place? If it's coming back from the root, that will not be a desirable apple tree. They need to assess that first. If it is coming from above the graft, then they're going to need to determine 2 things. Is it really worth trying to start another tree from that point, or are they time ahead to just go out and purchase another tree? Because it really looks like this tree either winter killed, and they will, even a winter killed tree will leaf out in the spring. It doesn't know it's dead yet, that portion of the tree. And so it will still leaf out, and looks like a winter kill situation. They have to assess whether they want to baby one of these sprigs back up and make it into a tree if it's above the graft, or just go out and start over again.
Okay. The second part, I think, could also be Connie, you, or Jerry. Another and unrelated problem has to do with 2 pear trees we planted last year. Same story, dormant stock. Came up a little more deer problem with these as well. And I think this would be our graphic 2 that you can take a look at here. And this could possibly be some environmental, but maybe even potential disease problems with this one, so with pears.
Yeah, that one looked like a late blight, or a, what do you call it?
Fire blight?
Thank you, fire blight kind of effect. And if that's the case, you'd want to remove those trees, whether it's, no matter where the new growth is at, get rid of that tree. But, you know, if you want it tested, that can be done too. You can send it into the college. But from the picture and the looks of it, it looks like fire blight.
Anything you can do to prevent that?
There are some sprays. You've got to do them in the spring, early on, before they start to leaf out. So that's too late for them.
Okay. And it seems like some varieties of pears just are very
more
much
susceptible.
More susceptible
Yeah.
to fire blight. But once you see that blackened, twisted leaf, it's a pretty distinct damage.
All right. And I believe there's a nice little brochure on that as well on fire blight that
Yes,
they could
there
pick up
is.
their local extension office. Okay. Jerry, can we mulch potatoes? If we can we use yard clippings such as grass? After we hill them up, we would like to mulch them if possible.
Yeah, mulching is an excellent thing to do for your potatoes because one of the most frustrating things about potatoes is sometimes they will form those enlarged roots, storage roots, just below the surface, and as they grow, they crack the soil open. And as anybody knows that's had this happen, when they're exposed to sunlight, they turn green on that portion. And that green skin, as far as it goes into the flesh, is actually poisonous as well, and so you got to peel that off. Mulch is an excellent way of keeping them in the dark, so to speak, so that they aren't exposed to sunlight, so that you have good quality potatoes underneath there. One caution though, potatoes are somewhat sensitive to the lawn weed killer products, and so if you've had your lawn treated for weeds, you need to wait at least 3 to 4 mowings before putting those sorts of grass clippings safely back on the garden. Those first 3 to 4 mowings you need to dispose, send them out to the landfill or whatever the case may be. You put those around your potatoes, you could see some twisting and curling and some injury to the potatoes.
Okay. American elm, they want to clip off some of the suckers to start a new tree. Will this work?
There are ways of taking softwood and hardwood cuttings. I think that would be something that I'd like to respond to, by mail or with the individual specifically, but because I'd have to determine if elms fall into the hardwood, the softwood. Need to talk a little bit more specifics on that.
Okay. Connie, they have a crab apple, 20 years old. It's dropping some leaves, and they think it looks like apple scab. What would you recommend for apple scab?
They should have probably been spraying it starting at blossom time. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the spray is, but you need to spray it, and you need to spray it every 7 days, I believe. So they could start now and maybe slow it down, but yeah, it should have been sprayed sooner.
That's more of an early spring treatment time to prevent
it
what
really
they're
is.
saying. Okay. Tomatoes, Jerry, do you know how to prune a tomato plant? That's what they'd like to know.
Pruning a tomato plant.
And I don't know if they're referring to where you pinch off some of those fruit.
About the only way of growing tomatoes where you need to really worry about pruning or pinching out the little suckers would be when you're staking a tomato. I mean, selecting 1 or 2 main stems to go on up, and you tie it to a stake is what it amounts to. And in that case, that particular method of growing tomatoes, you pinch out the little suckers and then leave those areas that are producing fruit. Problem with that method of growing tomatoes is that you're removing a good deal of the foliage at the same time, and tomatoes grown on a stake with that method are much more prone to sun scald because there just isn't the foliage there to shade those fruit.
Okay, while we're on tomatoes, we have another question that was sent to us, and this would be graphic 3 that we have. The leaves on this particular tomato plant are really chewed up to the stem. It's too early for tomato hornworm. Can there be something else that may be causing this, such as cutworms? We found pockets of cutworms throughout our garden, or would June beetles be able to do this? So, can you shed any light on that one, John?
Oh, that one's another fun one.
Yeah.
It's one of those where the damage is there and there's nothing apparent there to be causing it. After seeing this, I guess there are a couple things that kind of jump to mind. If they are finding cutworms, there's good possibility that that's what's causing the problem. In those cases, it looks like they've got barriers around the plants. Might make it a little more difficult for those cutworms to get up there. But if the cutworms are inside those barriers, you've just provided a really nice habitat for them in there too. The other one that'll get on like this and cause some issue in some cases is Colorado potato beetle. And like Jerry was talking about earlier tonight with the fruit, looks kind of similar. The 2 plants are in the same family. Colorado potato beetle likes tomatoes too, and it can feed on tomatoes as well.
Okay. While we're on the graphics, we're going to go to this one, Jim, for you. We have a sweet patch of yellow clover, is what they're calling it, growing right next to my garden, tomatoes, peppers, and so on. You mentioned white clover as being a good crop for in the garden on a previous episode. Can you identify that and give them any ideas what it is and what they should do about that?
I saw this picture a little earlier, and it looks to me like it's probably black medic, and that would not be a ground cover that you would want in or near your garden. In fact, the white clover certainly has advantages in the lawn, but again, I don't know about that in the garden as well. Whenever we grow something in the garden, we're competing with the crops that we're trying to grow. So I think this is going to be a little bit of an issue close to the garden. Again, the products you typically would use on that are going to be products that many garden plants are going to be sensitive to. I'm trying to remember specifically if that is. I believe it's an annual, so I'm not sure fall spraying is going to work, but it may be. It seems like there may be a fall annual, so we may still have an opportunity. Otherwise, as soon as it starts in the spring, we may need to do a treatment before we put the garden crops in.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, well, I tell you, dig it up and try to reseed. It's going to be difficult to go.
But if they were looking for a plant that perhaps they were trying to get nitrogen back in the soil, would black medic be one of those, nitrogen fixation? And even if it is it one that they would even want in the garden?
I don't think it's one I would want. Certainly not. I think there probably should be some better options. If we're looking at planting in the garden as perhaps a cover crop for part of the garden is being fallowed, I think there's some other options we could look at. But we may need to respond a little further to that one.
On that one there. Would a clover be beneficial in the garden?
Do you have any thoughts on that, Jerry?
Or are they too competitive to?
Perhaps something such as a sweet clover, if you catch it before it goes to seed. The problem with many of the clovers is they're prolific seeders. And so if you let it go too long and don't plow it under before it goes to seed, you've just planted about 7 years worth of nightmare trying to control all the seed that's going to germinate. And that's going to be the case absolutely with that black medic. Those little seed heads on the top just have hundreds of seeds in that little cone, that head. And gosh, if they're using that as a plow down or a cover crop, they've got a nightmare already.
Okay, so there is a concept there, but timing is really critical.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Well, our recent weather really doesn't make it feel much like summer is really upon us. But GardenLine met with John Ball, Extension Forester Specialist, to learn about trimming a hedge in the middle of the summer. John begins our lesson with identifying the correct tools for the job.
Well, we don't normally do a lot of pruning in midsummer, but there is a type of pruning that definitely needs to be done at this time of year, and that's shearing our hedges. Shearing hedges is actually a summer-long activity, and here's a couple of tips to make sure your shrubs look their best. First of all, when you're shearing, electric shears work the best, but the biggest and most important thing is to shear out. When you're going through and making your cuts, the hedge should always be wider at the base than it is at the top. By shearing in an outward motion like this, what you're going to do is make sure that the foliage at the bottom is kept in full sun. If we shear the other way, where you actually cut the shears into the shrub, and by the way, that's actually a very easy thing to do, you're going to find that these lower branches die out. So make a conscious effort as you're running the hedge shears to always make sure it's angled out. Doesn't need to be much, maybe 10 or 20 degrees. And as you're going along, that base should always be wider than the top. Really, your hedges should be more A-shaped than V-shaped, as most people commonly do. Once you've got the basic outline done with the good electric shears, it's time then to go back with the hand shears, and it really takes both to make the hedges look just right. After the basic shape is set, just go through with the hand shears and cut it back a little bit more. The general rule to shearing hedges like this is to let the plant grow out about 2 to 3 inches and then remove about half that new growth. So some plants, such as boxwood, you might be shearing 2 or 3 times a year. Other plants you might only need to shear once because they don't grow as much. We can shear throughout the summer, but no matter what plant you're shearing, try to get this work done by about August 15th. After that, you're finished with shearing for the year, because any shearing after that may result in new growth that'll actually get frosted out by our winter. So during the month of July and early August, get out there and do a little hedge shearing. This is the time to do it.
Well, we want to thank John for that helpful information, because now is really the time of the year you need to give those hedges some attention before they get too out of hand, and then try to go back to modify that. So thank you, John, for that information. Now back to our questions. We have one here, John, for you. An insect, earwig, chomping on peonies, rose, dogwood, rhododendron, looks like holly, looks kind of like a laced spider web on the leaf once they're done chewing on that. So,
yep.
Anything you can tell them about that?
Yeah, well, these are probably earwigs. These are something that have been a real problem over the last couple of years, and they seem to love this kind of weather. They like that cloudy, kind of moist weather. They're a nocturnal insect. They like those hidden, dark places, and that's really going to be one of the ways to try to control them, is to eliminate those hiding places for them. During the day, they love mulched areas. They like areas under hostas and things. And like this caller noted here, they will eat just about anything. And this holds true even other than plants. They will eat dead insects and, boy, just about anything. They're almost omnivorous. And so best way to control them is going to be trying to modify that habitat. Get rid of some of that mulch in those areas, open it up a little bit, a little more sunlight, take away their hiding places. And then beyond that, if you're still having problems with them, it's going to be a case of trying to apply an insecticide to those plants. Preferably something that's going to kind of stick to the leaves a bit. Contact insecticides won't really work in this case because you're not seeing the insect itself. You're going to want to get something that'll stick to the plant, and they have to come in contact, or else it's systemic in the plant.
Okay. Jerry, tea rose. She has a big, tall tea rose that bloomed beautifully last year. But this year the plant is about 5 feet tall, but no blossoms. She has fertilized it. She wonders if she prunes it back, if she would get more buds. They built a new deck around it last year. What can she do?
Gosh, it sounds like there could be some environmental things with this deck being constructed around it. Something may have happened in that process. Actually, pruning it down right now would not be a good idea at all. You want that plant to have as much leaf surface, manufacture as much food as possible in order to lay down as stored food into that root to kind of carry it through this tough year. It could be a challenge figuring out what the problem is there, but I would kind of concentrate more on what happened during that deck construction and see if there's something negative there.
Okay. Fernleaf peony, coming back to you, Jerry. Fernleaf peony, 2 years old. This is the first year it's bloomed. There are pod-like growths that seems to be divided into 3 parts, a pod, a seed, and brownish rose colored is what they are. Can this be planted so that 3 new peonies might grow?
Okay. I think they got it pretty well pegged there. That is the seed pod. If peonies get properly pollinated and fertilized, they will produce that seed pod. As far as taking that seed and trying to grow it, if you want something to do that's interesting to see if you can get it to grow, yes. But the recommended way of propagating peonies is by root division, lifting them, dividing the root, and planting 2 plants, 3, whatever you can divide it down into. But if you got time on your hands and would like to do an experiment, some people do occasionally get those peony seeds to germinate.
Okay. And if you do the dividing, the proper time for that would be?
Good point, Steve. Thank you. Excellent. You need to do that in the fall. The recommended time for dividing peonies is in the fall. Always, though, with anything that's transplanted in the fall, make sure that you mulch it very well, especially after the ground has froze, so that it kind of provides a little bit more time for that plant to become established.
Okay. Marigolds, the leaves are gone. There's no tracks around the plant. She wants to know what might be getting or eating the leaves off the marigolds.
Right.
Any ideas?
Well, we kind of probably guess it would be slugs in this case. That's going to be most likely thing that's going to come in and try to take those leaves out of there. Other than slugs on a marigold, you know, there are cases where you'll have rabbits come in and eat them, but usually you'll find them clipped at the base, or even possibly deer if you have some deer problems. Otherwise, as far as insects, we don't see a lot of insect problems on marigolds. They contain some chemicals that are repulsive or even toxic to a lot of the insects. So you probably be looking at slugs in that and see if you can go out and find slugs or tracks from them out there.
All right. Hollyhocks from Flandreau. On the west side of their garage are getting plenty of water. The bottom leaves are brown. The upper leaves look like they're a lace curtain. Looks like it's been working from the bottom of the plant, working its way up.
Right, and that's probably exactly what's happening there, Steve. If you go out and look at those leaves, especially if you flip them over or in the evenings, if you kind of wave your hand over them just a little bit, you may see what looks like the leaves start to move. These would be the intact leaves. And there are actually some tiny green plant bugs, they feed on the leaves themselves, that are running around on the surface of those leaves in a lot of these cases, and will start to cause that kind of lacy appearance damage to those plants. They do tend to work their way up because they're going to be on those leaves that are out, and the longer those leaves are out, the more time they have to feed on them and work their way through them. So it's a case where it's not that they're necessarily wanting bottom and then working up, it's just they've had the longest amount of time on those. As far as trying to control them, they're not likely to normally cause real problems to hollyhocks. Hollyhocks will probably persist without doing anything to them. Again, if you do want to, you know, any insecticide that's going to be labeled for them is likely to take those plant bugs out.
Okay, thank you. Jerry, I think you maybe answered this, but let's, it's kind of related, separate question. When can you transplant the fern peony bushes, and when would you cut them back for the wintertime?
Okay, time to cut them back for the wintertime is late September, usually, when that foliage has turned red and starting to maybe experienced a frost or two. The reason for doing that is because of the diseases that can overwinter on peonies. There's several common diseases that overwinter on the foliage, and so you remove that foliage, clean the area up, and you haven't got that inoculum then waiting until the very next spring to reinfect the plant. Once again, we did cover that a little bit earlier on the transplanting. Fall is the best time to do that, and then mulch it well for going through the winter.
Okay. Here's one from Brookings, and it may not be just isolated to Brookings, where it says, my garden has been underwater for about a week. And with all the recent rains, that's what's caused it, of course. Should I be concerned about my vegetables dying? Are there other concerns I should pay attention to? And any publications about flooded gardens? And if you get to that point about the publications, Jerry, I believe we have a graphic later on that we can put up that talks about those a little bit, or shows that anyway.
Very good. Yeah, most of our vegetables are not going to tolerate standing in water very long. Their roots drowned is what it amounts to, and they will rot and no longer be functional. So you're probably going to have a number of dead vegetables after the water recedes. Of more concern is going to be the possibility of either livestock or human waste pathogens that may have been in that water. If that is even remotely a possibility, then the recommendation is you should kind of destroy your garden and forget about it, because those pathogens can remain viable in the soil and on those plants for up to 3 months. And so if you think about the rest of our growing season, you count up 3 months, the season's going to be over anyway. We do have an excellent fact sheet on that, and I'll leave that to the graphic later.
Okay, I think they had that up while you were visiting about
did they?
the topic.
Okay,
so.
all right.
Good. And they can contact any of their local county extension office, or probably go on the website and print those off.
The Cooperative Extension Service website has a section there you can click on for flood-related issues. One of them is going to be gardens in the pop down there, and so you can download those fact sheets or view them online.
Okay, good. Jim, this one may be for you, and we have a graphic on this one as well, which would be graphic 5 for the studio. The leaf and tip curl. I thought it was a leaf curl due to the weather. Not sure about the stem problem. It does not appear to be affecting the growth of the plant at this time. Any ideas or thoughts what that might be?
Again, without having the sample in front, it's hard to say definitively, but just from what we see, it's entirely possible that we could be looking at some herbicide injury here. This is one of the reasons why this time of year I would really recommend that we do not use any of our lawn herbicides. We have so many sensitive plants, tomatoes being one of the very sensitive, grapes even more so. So I would expect that probably that we're looking at some sort of herbicide injury. Looking at the amount of damage, it very likely may grow out of it. It's kind of a wait and see approach.
Okay. I don't know if we can put that graphic back up. Connie, anything on maybe some of the spots on the stems?
That concerned me a little because there is a late blight on tomatoes, and it has that similar look. It doesn't do that to the leaves, but the lesions on the stem really look like late blight.
Okay.
If that's the case, they won't ever end up with an edible tomato off of it, and it'd be wise to rogue it out of there.
So they may have a couple potential problems
issues,
going
yeah.
on. Okay.
Yeah.
Would it be too late if they could still get a transplant, Jerry, to quick stick one in, or?
Most of the tomatoes take 70 to 80 days. Some of the earlier ones, maybe 50 days yet from planting to first fruit maturity. So if they were lucky, if it's a late fall, yeah, they might be able to still get some late tomatoes.
All righty. John, they have a circle of ants, not a hill. Area is flat, about 15 inch in diameter, crawling with ants. What household remedies could they use to help destroy them? Is what they have here, or control, I guess.
Yeah, not a hill, but a circle of ants.
Yeah.
Where's it from?
This particular one is from Eureka.
Eureka, okay. Yeah. We've got some ants out a little farther west that'll tend to produce just not really what we think of as true hills, but it's more of kind of a flat area. Sometimes they'll have a little cone-shaped hill in the center where they just clear vegetation out of there, and they'll live in those areas. The other ones that sometimes I get questions on around the eastern side of the state, it'd be something similar, are in lawns typically, and it's more a case where they're just mowing the hill off every week, hitting it with that mower and dispersing it, and so it looks like a circle rather than a hill. Either way, if you've got a lot of ants right in that area, you probably have a colony in the soil right underneath there, and that's where they're entering and leaving. If you look closely, you may find those holes where they're coming and going. If that's the case, it can be treated just like an ant hill. If you really want to get rid of it, some insecticide on there, rake it in a little bit, maybe a little light watering to kind of work that insecticide down in. But again, any of those ants that we're going to find in those areas, really going to be more beneficial insects to us. They'll help take care of those garden pests. They're things that you'd rather leave if you can live with them there.
Okay. Jerry, they have some sweet corn. They side dressed the corn with some nitrogen fertilizer before the rain and tilled it in. The rain in their location, 7 to 8 inches, did this cause the end to be leached out, and should it be reapplied? 32012 is what they used.
Okay. Well, nitrogen is water soluble. It moves through the soil profile with water. And with that kind of a rainfall, yeah, I would guess it's probably gone right down through the soil profile and is no longer available to the sweet corn. They might want to be looking at a reapplication after it dries up enough in the garden to get in there without sinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you go with a full rate on that still, or would they put? Or?
I don't know. You better be careful. If there is some of the nitrogen and you put a full rate on again, you could cause some burning. I think maybe you better experiment with that a little bit. A half rate perhaps the second time, then assess what the color looks like on the leaves. And if it's got a little light yellow color to it, light yellow-green or whatever, that might suggest that it is, again, nitrogen deficiency, and maybe then put on the other half.
Okay. A clump river birch. It has some yellow leaves. Someone said it was iron chlorosis. Would applying iron hurt this plant if that is not the problem, or other plants?
No, applying iron will not hurt anything. And it is most likely an iron chlorosis. If it's got the yellow leaves with green veins still in the leaf, the chelated iron would be the best way to go, the most readily available. You can get that at most nurseries, greenhouses, garden supply stores. Follow the label instructions for chlorotic plants, and I think it'll make a tremendous difference within a couple of days once that iron is available to that tree.
You do want to watch the timing on that iron, though, because if you do it in the heat of the day, it will burn the leaves.
Okay.
So you need to be a little careful and do it more towards evening or on a cloudy day.
Okay, to apply that.
To apply it, yeah.
All right. Tulips. Can she dig her tulips up? The leaves are brown. And how do you store them?
All right. Yes, if the leaves are brown, that means the plant has naturally died down. The leaves have already done their job. They've manufactured food, they've fed the bulb, and the bulb is ready for next year. My recommendation would be to leave those bulbs in until later on when the ground starts to cool, and then lift them and plant them where you want them, transplant them to wherever you want to have them permanently from that point on, because these are fall planted bulbs for spring bloom. And so the ideal time to be doing that would be in late September, October, to change the two locations.
Okay. Jim, we have an individual from Rapid City. They want to get rid of all their weeds in a garden area. What is the best way to do that so she could seed that to grass and not have the weeds come back?
Okay, so they're converting it from a garden area back into
That's
a lawn?
what the indications of this question are.
Okay,
Yep.
sounds good. Probably the best thing to use again would be a glyphosate or Roundup type product. Spray it out, following the label directions. Give it a couple weeks and see if anything still remains. Give it another spray. It's best if you can kill as many of those weeds before you try to plant new grass. This fall then would be an excellent time, or early September probably, to start in a new seedling grass. Fall is just an excellent time to plant grass. So get it sprayed out, get those things killed in that area first, perhaps give a good tilling, and then seed it in this fall.
Okay. John, Colorado potato beetles are out in full force this year. They physically remove at least one adult pair and egg masses per plant from 30 plants. With that many, they're not sure if they're getting all of those. Last year they used some bug be gone for control. What should they use for control this year when the larva can emerge?
Okay, good question actually. Potato beetles are out in big numbers.
And kind of a follow-up, it was suggested not to use the same product 2 years in a row. Is that something that you want to address as well, please?
Right. Well, and that is kind of an issue with Colorado potato beetle in particular. The number of products out there that can be used against them, unfortunately, they have a tendency to build resistance fairly quickly in Colorado potato beetles. And so you may run into some that are resistant to one chemical or possibly more than one chemical. It may be case where even if you switch chemicals, you may not kill them. So really the best recommendation is if you're not seeing any effect on them in the larvae, not in the adults because the adults will move quite a bit, but if you're not seeing any effect on the larvae, you probably want to switch chemicals at the time. As far as hand picking them, hand picking is a great option to get rid of them, especially if you don't have very many potato plants and you got a little time to go out there and do it. You may find that you end up with better results doing that than trying to spray them. The problem there again is it does take a fair amount of time. If you do miss some, a few out there aren't probably going to hurt a casual garden that much or a small potato patch. You can afford to share a little bit with them. The problem comes down to if they're really doing some serious harm to the potato plants or if they're spreading diseases into those plants. And if you suspect either of those, then it probably is time to get a chemical on.
Okay. Neem oil. They would like to use it for insect control on strawberries and raspberries. Can this product be used up to the day of harvest? The instructions on the bottle from the store do not really address this issue. Anybody familiar with neem oil?
A little bit.
I'm not overly familiar with it. Typically, if the label doesn't prohibit, if it doesn't require a harvest interval, then you assume it's 0. Now, John, I don't know if you have had much experience with that?
Just a little bit. It's one of those interesting ones that it's a natural product, and so people assume it's completely safe and they can handle it that way. I think that's probably right. There is no real pre-harvest interval. I guess a couple of the forms that I've seen, it does have a re-entry interval, and some of that's a day, so you check that first.
Okay, thank you very much. And that's all the time we have for this evening. Just to let you know, Garden Line does repeat twice each week on South Dakota Public Broadcasting Digital Channel number 3, also known as the Create Channel. The encore broadcast can be seen Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central and Saturdays at 4 p.m. Central. Check your local listings to find SDPB Digital Channel 3. Thanks to our panel tonight, experts John Kiekefer, Brookings County Extension Educator, Jerry Mills, Brown County Extension Educator, Connie Tandy with the Diagnostic Lab at SDSU, and Jim Wilson, Extension Pesticide Educator Coordinator. Thank you to our phone volunteers, the Brookings Area Master Gardeners, and thanks to you for watching and calling in. Have a good evening.
This program is funded in part by Swiftel Communications.